Today, we need to talk about Jeff Wittek, Jason Nash, and the whole roast situation. As you guys know, Jeff participated in the roast of Bryce Hall, and everyone was really excited to hear his jokes. Then, out of nowhere, Jeff completely pulled out of the roast and had Jason edit all his parts out. Jeff blamed the whole thing on David, and David started getting tons of backlash. Jason has finally addressed what happened, and his version of events is a lot different from Jeff's. It's a mess, so let's get into it. Back in February, Jason Nash hosted the roast of Bryce Hall. The event was sponsored by SeatGeek, and they had tons of influencers participate, like Adam W., Jeff Wittek, Josie, Josh Richards, Tana Mojo, and Jonah. A few years ago, the Vlog Squad held the roast of Jason Nash, and out of everyone, Jeff had the best set. The comments were filled with people saying how much of a natural Jeff was, saying things like, Jeff was professional comedian quality. He needs his own comedy show on Netflix. So when the trailer was released for the roast of Bryce Hall, everyone was really excited to see Jeff mentioned in the lineup. That excitement was short-lived when Jeff announced he was no longer participating in the roast. He asked Jason to edit out all of his parts and completely cut him from the video. He tweeted, "I'm no longer a part of the roast of Bryce Hall. My entire set will be cut due to censorship and David Dobrik being involved. I refuse to be a part of anything that scumbag is involved in from here on out." And obviously, Bryce Hall was super confused because Jeff was at the roast. He did participate and he was expected to be in the video. Bryce tweeted Jeff and said, "Did I miss a chapter? What the fuck?" And Jeff replied, "I chose to have my set cut. They tried to remove half of my jokes. This was supposed to be a comedy show. I didn't say anything I wouldn't say in my own YouTube videos or podcast. This is all because that coward was there and he can't take jokes." So from Jeff's tweets, it seems like the main reason all his jokes got cut were because of David. As you guys know, this all happened last week when Jeff finally decided to stop supporting and protecting David. He completely cut ties with him and has been dragging him online ever since. I guess the icing on the cake was finding out a huge part of his roast were being cut, and he assumed it was probably because of David. The sponsor for the roast was SeatGeek, and SeatGeek is David's biggest sponsor. They give him cars to give away. All his videos are sponsored by them. Their relationship is huge. David brings them in a lot of money, and I'm sure they're paying David really well in return. Since none of David's videos are monetized, normally because of copyrighted music or even because of YouTube, David really relies on his sponsorships. Back in March of 2021, when David was being accused of some pretty serious stuff by Insider, SeatGeek dropped him. They said they were not currently working with him, and they also had no future plans for any partnerships. Fast forward a year later, things have kind of died down for David, and SeatGeek is once again sponsoring him and all of his friends. SeatGeek was a sponsor for the roast, so everyone assumed David made SeatGeek tell Jason to cut all of Jeff's jokes that he didn't like, especially the ones that have to do with the accident that caused his eye injury or anything that made David look bad. After all, Jeff did say his jokes were cut because David's a coward who can't take jokes. Well, Jason Nash is claiming David had nothing to do with it. Jason posted a video titled "Update on the Bryce Hall Roast." In this video, Jason explains why Jeff was cut and who had the ultimate decision on the final cut of the roast. Jason said SeatGeek sponsored the roast and claimed they were really good to work with, but they wanted some jokes cut.
And basically, there were a bunch of jokes that they wanted cut out of it. And I said, of course, you guys are paying, and that's the way it works with brands. Brands, they're paying you. So, they want certain things gone.
Jason agreed to cut all the jokes that they wanted gone because they were paying for the episode and he had to listen to what they wanted. Jason said the jokes they wanted cut weren't that crazy, but they did want 5 or 6 jokes cut from Jeff's set. Jason was negotiating between SeatGeek and Jeff over what they could keep in and what needed to be cut, but ultimately, Jeff didn't like SeatGeek's offer.
And so I got Jeff to cut 2 of the jokes, but then there were 3 more that Jeff wouldn't budge on, and he said, "I want to pull my set." And so that's basically it. There's no drama to it. It's unfortunate because Jeff's set was so good and so funny.
Jason said Jeff decided to pull out completely because he felt like his set was going to suffer if these jokes weren't included. Jason said he still talks to Jeff every day and there's no drama. He's just trying to get his kids to college. He even said there's a possibility that Jeff might release the footage on his own Patreon or something, so it sounds like Jeff has full access and the rights to do what he wants with his own footage. Jason went on to say in no way is he trying to silence or censor Jeff. He's not the one saying Jeff can't do this or that. It's the brand. Jason also said this has nothing to do with David. David didn't have access to the footage, he doesn't even watch Jason's stuff, so he had no part in Jeff's jokes being removed.
The one thing I will say, I've seen some comments that David had some hand in cutting Jeff's set. That is not the case. David hasn't even seen the roast. David doesn't watch my videos. We all know that. So, but no, he hasn't even seen it. And in fact, I think Jeff only had one David joke, and that joke wasn't cut. That joke is in. And you'll probably see that if Jeff ever posts it. I'm sure Jeff is going to probably say something about this on his podcast or you know, his live stream that he does on Patreon, and he'll probably explain it and you know, give you his side of it, and I hope he does.
A lot of people are really confused though, because Jeff said the whole reason his jokes were cut was because of David not being able to take a joke. To me, that would make the most sense. SeatGeek is David's #1 sponsor, so of course they wouldn't want their biggest player to be painted in a bad light. After all, they went into this thinking it was going to be a roast on Bryce Hall. They don't want to give anyone a reason to go digging back into David's past and being reminded of what David did again. Then they'd have to cut David off and lose tons of money. It makes sense. But now we have Jason saying it had nothing to do with David. So what's the reason then? Jeff just released a podcast with Tana Mojo, which we're going to talk about later this week because Tana brought up a lot. She talked about her issues with James Charles. She talked about making up with Shane. It was truly a mess. But they also talked about their experience doing the roast. The episode starts off with just Jeff and Mike, and they talked about how Jeff is having issues with everyone lately. Jeff said he has no issues with SeatGeek, and he also has no issues with Jason Nash.
Whoever wants it, yeah.
Well,
I mean, go round off the list.
Well, I mean, God Almighty, dude! It looks like sponsors like. I can't. I got to be careful. I mean,
I don't have no beef with
some of these people.
SeatGeek's a very good dear friend of mine. They send me good money. They are responsible for a large chunk of my annual income. So I got no beef with them. I got no beef with Jason. I love him. He was here earlier.
When is that going to potentially air?
Probably in like a week now.
It sounds like Jeff's jokes weren't the only ones that got cut. Mike said some of the jokes people were saying were very risky, and some even went too far.
I'm curious to find out if they cut Tana's jokes too.
That show is, I mean, that was a violent, visceral show for anyone in the audience, and people out there in America should be, you know, kind of priming themselves up and getting ready to cringe a little bit because it was.
You think
just
people are going to get canceled?
I guess creators are starting to say we don't do canceled anymore. You know, there were some jokes in that thing that were quite risque.
He said some involved Astroworld and other controversial issues, and SeatGeek had to cut a lot down. The roast finally aired yesterday, and you could tell almost everyone had jokes cut. There were jump cuts in places, and you could tell it was edited down to be less controversial. The weird thing is, Adam W. made a joke about Jeff not being able to see from his accident, and it was left in. Not only was it left in, but they also panned over to David, and they showed him laughing.
Jason, who can't see his own kids, and Jeff, who can't see anything. I want to get serious here for a second and say, Jeff, after the whole excavator incident, we all agreed no more heavy machinery. Until tonight, when we had to use a to get Joan on.
So, I don't know, this whole situation isn't making a lot of sense. If they wanted to protect David, I feel like they probably should have cut out him laughing at an injury he caused. Here's what people had to say. I want to watch Jeff's part even more now. Based off some of these jokes, I guarantee SeatGeek didn't have a problem with any of Jeff's jokes. Finding out Jeff got cut for being too edgy after hearing all of these dark jokes makes me want to hear his set more. I really hope Jeff releases his set somewhere so we can finally figure out what SeatGeek was trying to hide. Anyways guys, let me know what you think about everything down below, and I'll see you next time.